Yeah, good afternoon everyone. I am Professor Anuradha Jain, Professor of Economics at Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies. Today we are here to discuss about what are the different methods of measuring price elasticity of demand. As we know that elasticity of demand is a very important concept. Because when we study law of demand, we just come to know like in which direction demand will move when price changes. But how much it will change is studied by price elasticity of demand or other types of elasticity of demand. So, elasticity of demand is very important concept in day-to-day life and day-to-day decision also. So, in this session, we are going to discuss what are the different types or methods of measurement of elasticity of demand. So, elasticity of demand can be measured by various ways, and mainly, there are four methods to measure the elasticity of demand. One is total expenditure method, another is proportionate method, then point method and arc method. Now, if we talk about total expenditure method, then Dr. Marshall has evolved the total expenditure method to measure the price elasticity of demand. Now, according to this method, elasticity of demand can be measured by considering the change in price and the subsequent change in total quantity of goods purchased and the total amount of money that we spend on purchasing those commodity. Now, total expenditure can be calculated as price into quantity demanded. So, there are three possibilities, like if suppose there is a fall in the price, okay, then total expenditure may increase or total expenditure may go down or total expenditure may remain same. So, on the basis of how much the total expenditure is there and in which direction it is changing, we measure the elasticity of demand. Now, if with a rise or fall in the price, demand or falls or rises respectively, the total expenditure remains the same, then the demand will be unitary elastic. It means that like whether price goes down or price increases, you spend the same amount of money on that commodity, then we can say that elasticity of demand according to this method is equal to 1. Now, if a fall in price, the total expenditure also falls, or with the rise in price, the total expenditure also rises, then the demand is said to be less elastic or elasticity of demand is less than 1. Now, total expenditure method you can see with the help of this table also, like when the price falls from rupees 9 to rupees 8, the total expenditure increases in the first case from 180 rupees to 240, and when price rises from 7 to rupees 8, the total expenditure falls from 280 to 240. So, demand is elastic here. So, you can say that in this case demand is greater than 1. Why greater than 1? Because when price falls, the total expenditure increases here, like price decreases from 9 rupees to 8 rupees and quantity demanded also is increasing and total expenditure is increasing, because earlier we were spending 180 rupees and now we are spending 240 rupees. So, in this case, the total expenditure method shows that elasticity will be greater than 1. Now, another example, when with the fall in the price from rupees 6 to 5, like earlier it was 6 rupees, now 5 rupees, with the rise in the price from rupees 4 to 5, the total expenditure remains unchanged, that is 300. So, when price is going down from rupees 6 to 5, you are adjusting your demand in such a way that your total expenditure remains same 300. And similarly, when price rises, then also you are adjusting your demand in such a way that again the expenditure is same. So, in this case, it is known to be elasticity of demand equal to 1. When price falls, from 3 rupees to 2, total expenditure falls. That means when price is going down, expenditure is also going down. Okay, so in that case elasticity of demand is less than 1. So to summarize this, you can see this table, like when price falls and total expenditure rises, or suppose price rises, total expenditure falls, then in that case elasticity of demand is greater than 1. And if it remain unchanged, whether the price falls or price rises, then elasticity of demand is equal to 1. Or another case, when price falls, demand or total expenditure also falls, and when price rises, total expenditure rises, then it is less than 1. Now that can be seen with the help of some question, like example, like suppose initially price is 2 rupees, quantity demanded is 10, then suppose price changes to 4 and quantity demanded is 5, then what will be the elasticity of demand in this case according to the total expenditure method. So that you can see here, when price was 2, demand was 10, so that means total expenditure is 20. When price increases to 4, demand is now 5, so total expenditure is again 20. So that means elasticity of demand is equal to 1. Okay, so this is how we can solve the numericals according to this method. Now another method is percentage or proportionate method. This method is also associated with the name of Dr. Marshall. Now according to this method, price elasticity of demand is the ratio of proportionate change in quantity demanded to proportionate change in price, and it is also known as percentage method, ratio method or arithmetic method. And the formula for this is like delta Q upon delta P into P upon Q, and we can calculate the elasticity of demand putting the values in this method. Now example, like when price of a commodity is rupees 1, then consumer spends rupees 80, and if the price of commodity is 20, then consumer spends rupees 96. So how do we calculate this? You can put this value, the delta Q upon delta P into P upon Q, and you will find that when price elasticity of demand is less than 1, so that means it is coming around 0.4. Okay, so you can put the values in the formula and then we can calculate the price elasticity of demand. Another method is the point method or geometric method, and this is the measure of price elasticity of demand of different points at the demand curve, because at every point on the demand curve elasticity is different. Okay, so when we calculate at a particular point, then this method is known as a point method, and this was also suggested by Professor Marshall and used only with the reference to a linear demand curve. So elasticity of demand at a point. So how do we calculate this formula for this? Point elasticity of demand is equal to lower segment of the demand curve, like at whichever point you want to calculate. Like suppose if you want to calculate at point A or point B, then the lower segment, that means below A, okay, so that will be lower segment, that means AD here, and upper segment of the demand curve. So lower segment of the demand curve divided by upper segment of the demand curve. So that way you can calculate through point method. So if suppose you want to calculate the elasticity of demand at the center of the demand curve, then lower segment will be equal to the upper segment, and in this case the point elasticity of demand will be equal to 1. And if you move towards x-axis, then lower segment becomes less, upper segments become more. So towards x-axis, if you are moving on the demand curve, then elasticity will be less than 1, and towards y-axis when we will move, then elasticity will be greater than 1. Another method is arc method. Now we have studied the measurement of elasticity of demand at a point on a demand curve, but when elasticity is measured between 2 points on the same demand curve, then it is known as arc method. Now in the words of Professor Baumol, arc elasticity is a measure of the average responsiveness to price change exhibited by demand curve over some finite scratch of the curve. So any 2 points on a demand curve make an arc. Okay, so in this diagram you can see that the area between point, like suppose P and point M on this demand curve in this figure is an arc which measures elasticity over a certain range of price and quantity. Now on any 2 points of a demand curve, the elasticity coefficients are likely to be different depending upon the method of computation. So when we have already discussed proportionate method, point method, then why there is a need of an arc method? Now arc method is very, very important because at every point it becomes very, very difficult to calculate elasticity of demand. So therefore the arc method is considered to be very, very relevant and most relevant, you can say, method for calculating the elasticity of demand. Now after understanding the concept of elasticity of demand, we should also know like what are the uses of elasticity of demand for managerial decision making. As I said that in day-to-day decision making, elasticity of demand is very, very important. So first here is the determination of price. The primary objective of any firm is to earn profit or increase revenue. So therefore increasing price of its product to maximize profit is one of the primary concern for any producer. Now during the course of increasing price, the producer must not forget that demand and price share inverse relationship. So if to earn more profit, if they increases the price, then they may have to compromise because demand may go down. So understanding the elasticity of demand becomes very, very important here. Like with the increase in price, how much demand will go down? So they must be aware that demand falls with rise in price, and thus they must increase the price of their commodity to that level where their desire or optimal profit is still achievable. Okay, so therefore determination of price depends upon elasticity of demand. Like suppose for example that if demand for the product which producers are selling is inelastic, then producers may increase price to any extent because they know that demand will not go down. Okay, but if demand is highly elastic, in that case producers will have to think twice before increasing the price. Okay, because in that case they may incur loss instead of increasing the profit. So price determination, elasticity becomes very, very important. Another is at the time of wage determination. If a commodity is of inelastic nature, the labor can force the employer to increase their wages through extreme ways like strike. Okay, as a result, the company will have to consider the demand of labor in order to meet the demand of consumers for the inelastic goods. However, if the commodity is of elastic nature, labor unions and other associations cannot force the employer to raise wages, as the producers can alter the demand of their producers. Okay, so wage determination also depends upon the elasticity of demand, and that can be elasticity of demand for the commodities because demand for labor is a derived demand. It depends upon the demands for the commodities. Another importance is in international trade. So we already know that change in price cannot bring drastic change in demand of the product in case of inelastic commodity. But even a slight change in price can cause huge effect on demand of elastic commodity. Okay, so we have also known that higher price can be charged for inelastic goods and lowest price possible price must be set for elastic product. Now taking into account this information, a country may fix higher price for goods of inelastic nature. However, if the country wants to export its products of a commodity in the importing country should also be considered. Now for example, like rice may be an inelastic product for China, okay, and thus exports around the world at the price X But if rice is price elastic in US, China will be forced to decrease the price from the initial value of X to be able to sell these products in the American market. Then elasticity of demand is also very, very important to the finance minister or taking various decisions regarding tax. So price elasticity of demand can also be used in the taxation policy in order to gain, high tax revenue from the citizen. Now, one of the ways would be for government to raise tax revenue in commodities which are price inelastic. For example, government could increase the tax amount in goods like cigarettes and alcohol, given how these are the commodities people choose to purchase regardless of the price tag. The tax revenue would significantly rise. On the other hand, in case of commodity with elastic demand, high tax rates may fail to bring in the required revenue for the government. Okay, then price discrimination. The situation, where a single group or company controls almost all of a market for a particular good or services is called monopoly. The monopolistic markets lacks competition. Thus, the goods or services are often charged high prices in such markets. But if the product is inelastic, the producer can earn profit by selling high prices at higher prices. However, if the product is elastic or the demand for that product is elastic, the producer must set low or at least reasonable price so that the consumers are attracted to buy these products. Now, for example, if fuel is a necessity for consumers, so therefore, monopolist who runs the market of fuel can generate profit even by setting high prices of the fuels. Joint products are various products, generated by a single production procedure at a single time, like sheep and wool, cotton and cotton seeds, wheat and hay, etc. are some examples of joint products. But however, since they are two different products, we cannot sell them at the same price in the market. So price elasticity of demand play a very important role in determining the prices of these joint products. Now let us, suppose there has been bumper production of cotton this season. Now as a result, huge amount of cotton as well as cotton seeds have been produced. Now cotton has wide scope in the market as it can be used for different purposes. The producer of cotton can gain maximum profit by setting high price of cotton, as demand for cotton in market is not easily altered, but cotton seeds have limited scope. So it is an inelastic product. So if the business does not decrease the price, then demand will be less. Okay, so by setting a high price for cotton and low price for cotton seeds, the businesses can maximize its revenue. So you can see that elasticity play a very, very important role in every aspect of life. Wherever the decision has to be taken, elasticity of the demand either from the buyer side or the seller side affect in the decision making, and on whose favor the decision will be there depends upon their elasticity. Okay, so it is very, very important concept. But what are the factors that influence the elasticity of demand? Okay, it depends upon many factors, like whether the product will be inelastic demand or product will be of elastic demand. So it depends upon various factors, like it depends upon nature of commodity, availability of substitute, variety of uses of the product, postponement of demand, amount of money spent, time, range of price. So one by one, briefly, quickly we can discuss this, like nature of commodity. Elasticity or inelasticity of demand depends upon the nature of commodity, like whether the commodity is of necessity item or it's a luxury item or it's a comfort. So normally what we see, that demand for necessity item like salt, rice, etc. is inelastic. On the other hand, demand for comforts or the luxuries item is elastic. Another, factor on which it depends is the availability of the substitutes. So elasticity of demand depends on availability or non-availability of the substitute. In case, those commodities which have many substitutes, demand is elastic, because if one increases the price, you will go for the other commodity and you can buy various other substitutes. But in case of commodities where there is no substitute, demand is inelastic, because you don't have other option. Okay, you have to buy that product whatever be the price. So availability of substitutes makes product demand elastic, and therefore price are fixed accordingly. Price will be always competitive price. Then another factor is variety of uses. If commodity can be used for several products, then it will have elastic demand. For example, like electricity. On the other hand, like demand is inelastic for commodities which can be put to only one use. Like milk is also example of this. Like milk has various uses. You can use it for making tea, coffee, curd, paneer, kheer, sweet dishes and all. So if price increases, you may restrict the consumption of milk to some products only, and you will not make use for the other preparations. So demand can be changed very easily because the uses are multiple there. Another factor is postponement of demand. If the consumption of a commodity can be postponed, then it will have elastic demand. On the contrary, if the demand for a commodity cannot be postponed, then demand is elastic. Okay, the demand for rice or medicine cannot be postponed, while the demand for cycle or umbrella can be postponed. Okay, so for products which you can postpone your demand, it will be elastic, and products for which you cannot postpone your demand, the demand will be inelastic. Then whatever is the price, you will have to pay, you will have to buy. Then amount of money spent. Elasticity of demand also depends on the amount of money that we spend on the commodity. Now, if consumers spend a very small amount on a product, for example, a consumer spend little amount on salt and matchboxes, suppose. So even when the price of salt or matchboxes goes up, demand will not change. Like suppose salt is 50 rupees per kg. In a month, how much we are spending? We are spending 50 rupees. We consume 1 kg of salt. So even if they make price like 60 rupees, 70 rupees, people don't mind paying, because in a month, the only difference will be of 10 rupees, 20 rupees on their total expenditure. So therefore, demand in the case of clothing of consumers, where spend a large proportion of his income, and an increase in price will reduce this demand for clothing. So demand is elastic there. Another factor is time. Like elasticity of demand varies with time. Generally demand is inelastic during short period and elastic during long period, because long period there are many other factors that will also work. Okay, and short term sometimes it may be emergency situation, or you cannot change your demand from one product to the other product. So in short term, normally demand is inelastic, but in the longer period demand is elastic. Okay, and another factor is range of prices. Range of prices exerts an important influence on elasticity of demand. Like at a very high price, demand is inelastic, because a slight fall in price will not induce the people to buy more. Similarly, at a low price also, demand is inelastic. This is because at a low price, all those who want to buy the commodity would have bought it, and a further fall in price will not increase the demand. So therefore, elasticity is low at very low prices. So these are the various factors on which elasticity of demand depends, or which determines the elasticity of demand. So thank you so much, and I'm sure you must have understood this concept. So basically you should know like what is elasticity of demand, what are the types of elasticity of demand, and what are the factors that affects the elasticity of demand, and how do we measure the elasticity of demand. So these are important concepts, and every aspect of life this concept is useful, and you will observe, like suppose even if you go to market to buy a commodity, and suppose if it is an emergency situation, okay, you need to buy that product. So in that situation, your demand for that product is relatively inelastic. So seller will understand that your demand is inelastic and you will buy that product at any price. So obviously he will charge more price from you. Okay, and vice versa, like suppose for example, if you are not in emergent situation and you will buy only when prices are low, then even shopkeeper will be ready to sell you at the lower price. Okay, so it's a psychologically people understand, the seller will also understand your psychology, you will understand the psychology of seller. So elasticity of demand at that particular moment will play an important role, in determination of the price of that product. So this concept is very important. So thank you for your patience hearing, and I'm sure you must have understood this concept. Thank you.